the pain like.
Hey guys, dearyoongi here, and welcome back to my channel. Ever since poor marketing decisions in K-pop, I have been thinking about following that up with poor business decisions in K-pop, and the time has finally come for me to do this video. So I'll be listing some examples of things I have seen K-pop companies do that make me question who is making the decisions over there, and why these can be detrimental to both the physical and financial success of a company. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, one poor business decision I have seen from K-pop companies is when they debut multiple groups within a short time frame. Okay, so I'm literally the same person who a few videos ago expressed how we as K-pop fans are usually excited to see new groups debuting. And this should be a good thing for us because it keeps the industry interesting and constantly moving. And from a company's perspective, debuting as many groups as possible might seem like a good idea because it gives them more chances of finding something that sticks and a group that will go on to achieve success. However, this is not always going to be the case. When a company decides to debut multiple groups back to back, they can essentially be creating their own competition, especially if they're debuting multiple groups within a short time frame aiming for the same portion of the K-pop market. So for example, debuting multiple girl groups with similar concepts who are of course going to attract the same sort of fandom. These groups are likely going to be fighting for the same resources, a portion of the same promotion budget, and yes, the same fans. And it will not take a fortune teller to predict what would happen in this situation. The company will wait it out for a couple of years perhaps, decipher which group is more successful, and that'll be the one who ends up getting more opportunities in future, while the other kind of just gets neglected. When really both groups could have succeeded in their own right had they been given their own individual opportunity to shine. Let's be honest, most companies don't have unlimited money to throw around as it is. So when you're spreading your resources too thin across multiple groups instead of really investing in making the one or two successful, you're setting everyone up for mediocre results at best. And maybe a separate topic entirely, but I have always wondered if this would make a weird dynamic for the idols within these groups at their label. It is likely a lot of them even train together due to similar debut dates. They might even be friends, but will the vibe between them get weird if they're constantly competing for the same pool of resources or same fans? Maybe that's something for us to discuss in the comments or another time, let me know. Okay, moving on. Another poor business decision you can see from K-pop companies is when they build lavish company buildings or headquarters instead of investing in artist development. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying companies shouldn't want to have a nice office space or a nice building to represent them and their brand. But let's just get some perspective here. What should really be a greater priority for your business? The nice glass doors on the outside or the people working their butts off on the inside? You can often see K-pop companies spending what must be millions on these absolutely huge state-of-the-art buildings with a gorgeous lobby, floor after floor of office spaces, practice rooms with crazy lighting, etc. Then the next day you will see a protest truck outside sent by fans asking why they haven't seen their fave for 2 years. I completely understand that for these companies, image might be everything, and they could be even working on the logic of fake it till you make it, you know? So if their building looks impressive, then everyone will assume they're doing better than they are. However, I feel stupid even saying this, but fans don't stan buildings. This might just be me, but I have never been more impressed by a label and ignored their malpractices because, oh well, at least the headquarters look cool. I personally don't care what an artist I like's building looks like. I care about how they're being treated within those practice rooms with the cool lights, and if they're getting the same development that these multi-million-dollar structures are getting. Have you ever been to a restaurant because it looked amazing on the outside or in pictures, but then you finally eat there and the food is actually low-key kind of bad? You're not likely going to just eat there again because, oh well, at least the chairs were nice, you know? Plus, aside from fans, let's just think about this from a business perspective. Your artists are your main revenue stream. They're the ones bringing in the album sales, concert tickets, merchandise sales, and all those brand deals. So shouldn't investing in their success be your top priority? I don't want any idols to be rehearsing in insufficient spaces, but I have a feeling that even they would agree. They would rather their company perhaps plug more of its money into resources, such as their personal development and their promotions. Then in turn, that will attract fans' attention and money. If you then want to go and fork out thousands on a fancy building, then sure, be my guest, because at least you prioritized growth internally first. Okay, I'm definitely ranting. Moving on, the next poor business decision I wanted to discuss is becoming an increasing problem in K-pop K-pop, and that is investing in failed platforms or apps that fans don't want. K-pop companies appear to always be finding new ways to shock us, but they always claim their original aim was to revolutionize the idol-to-fan interactive experience or something like that. And while this sounds like a good idea, in execution it always leads to companies making questionable decisions that either confuse us as fans or get them as a company tons of backlash. There seems to be a trend nowadays of K-pop companies investing money into platforms, whether it be a collaboration with another company or off their own back, and these are usually always literally something nobody asked for. I know just saying platforms is probably a confusing concept, so let's talk about some real examples. RBW Entertainment's recent decision to partner with Almigo. I did upload a whole video on this topic if you'd like to check that out in full, but just to quickly summarize for the sake of this video, the idea behind this application is that it has an AI avatar character base that fans could message with, and RBW collaborating with this company meant that some of its female idols would be added to the application as AI avatars for fans to communicate with. Seems innocent enough, right? Well, no. The app was free to play, however it did also have a paid 18+ spicy feature, which allowed users to video chat spicy content with these avatars of real idols. RBW ended up having to issue an apology and remove its artists from the platform, but this whole ordeal made fans lose a lot of the little faith they already had in the company, because it showed they were prepared to sell out the artists they're supposed to be protecting to something like this for a bit of money. Another example I wanted to address was Triple S and what their label Mod House is doing. Triple S are known for the fact they are a 24-member girl group, but also the fact that the label wanted to market them as K-pop's first decentralized group, which means the members will rotate across the group and its units at the choice of fans. While this concept sounded interesting, the way in which they went about this has always received mixed reactions. Triple S have an official app called Cosmo and digital photo cards called Objects, which change into an NFT token, and these are what fans can use to vote on things within the app. For those who don't know, NFTs are non-fungible tokens, and what this basically means is that they are each a unique set of data that cannot be exchanged like a cryptocurrency would be. However, NFTs are built on the same sort of blockchain technology, which is why you hear people talking about them in correlation, and NFTs are usually represented by something like an image. K-pop fans have expressed their disliking for NFTs in the past because they're seen as an exploitative cash grab in general, and now they're being used to target fandoms who might not necessarily know what they're purchasing. And in this case, it's not like you're physically purchasing an album or even a physical photo card. It's virtual ownership of something, or the right to vote on something. My main issue with K-pop companies venturing into these sorts of applications and platforms and methodologies is that it really shows clear signs of misreading your audience or not understanding their wants or needs because you have been blinded by the concept of money. It might seem more complicated at times, but honestly, I think most of us as K-pop fans are quite simple in our wants and needs from the industry. I want to find groups that I like, that release music I like listening to. I want to then support them by purchasing their physical albums or streaming their music on platforms or going to see them in concert. K-pop companies, however, are attempting to move with the times, sure, but applying functionalities that may be more successful in other industries to something that is not broken and didn't need fixing isn't a good idea. It's like there's a disconnect between them and us, and their lack of research into that just further makes fans feel as though they really don't care what we want. The next issue I wanted to discuss is one we see a lot in K-pop, and that is shelving trained idols for years after debut, wasting million-dollar investments. Okay, this one honestly just makes me frustrated, so I'll try and keep it short. It is a known fact that it is not a cheap endeavor to debut a K-pop artist, and companies do have to spend a substantial amount of money to prepare an artist and get them to a stage where they are ready to debut. This can include vocal lessons, dance training, language lessons, media training if companies are doing that, etc. But then you have some companies who will put in all that effort to debut an artist, then they just leave them sitting there doing nothing for months or even years at a time. But if you spent millions training someone and getting them ready for debut, wouldn't you want to make sure they're actually active and bringing in revenue to recoup some of that cost that went into the investment? As a business, it does not make any sense to spend all this money on something and then not use it. What's even more frustrating is that this doesn't just waste the company's investment, it wastes the idol's potential and their already limited career window within the K-pop industry. K-pop careers are notoriously short, and these idols are often people who gave up their teenage years and early 20s to train for this opportunity. So when companies just shelve them after they debut, they're essentially throwing away not just their own money, but these people's dreams and futures. It's also very difficult for us as fans to establish a connection with an artist whom we never see, or there isn't enough content for us to consume. Then these are the same companies wondering why their artists are struggling to pull in revenue. Well, it's because they're rarely coming back or making media appearances. So how do you expect an artist to establish a fan base or a connection with them when they're never actively in front of said potential fan base? Okay, moving on, I hope I kept that fairly short. Another poor business decision from K-pop companies for us to discuss is a big one this time: not conducting proper research before going on tour. Touring should be one of the most straightforward ways for companies to make money from their artists, but they somehow often always manage to make things more complicated and, more importantly, more costly than they need to be. And the worst part is that most of these disasters could usually be avoided with just a little bit of research and planning. There's multiple different areas we could discuss where companies constantly drop the ball when it comes to tour planning, so we're going to do that. First up, we have companies hiring event organizers that are completely underqualified to put on something as big and complex as a K-pop tour. Sometimes I'm really not sure where companies are finding these event organizers, but it's likely they're finding cheaper third parties to take most of the legwork of tour organizing away from them, of course for a high fee. But then we end up in circumstances where companies keep partnering with promoters who have no idea what they're doing, and fans, or sometimes even the artists themselves, are left stranded, not knowing what the schedule even is for their own tour, and the overall quality of the show is simply not what it could be, if fans even get one. Shows getting cancelled last minute because the organisers realise they bit off more than they could chew is not an uncommon occurrence. Then we have the classic mistake of booking venues that are way too big for the artist's actual audience size within that area, and this one is just sad because it's kind of embarrassing for everybody involved. You can't expect an artist to have the same amount of popularity everywhere they visit, therefore the chosen venues need to reflect the expected audience size in that location. Sometimes companies are lazy and just pick venues in what seems like a totally random fashion. Not only does this look bad for the artist, but it's also a massive loss of revenue for the company if they have to move venues during the preparation stage, because it is likely there will be a non-refundable deposit from the original venue and higher expenses from the new venue due to the last minute changeover. On a not too dissimilar note, another area you see companies failing when it comes to touring is poor tour route planning. Surely if you're planning on doing multiple dates in the US and Canada or multiple dates in Europe, then you would have them do them within the same time frame, right? But no, sometimes companies will have their groups flying from one side of the world to the other, then back again, instead of doing a logical route that will minimize travel costs and the strain put on the artists to keep up with the crazy jet lag. All these unnecessary travel costs and traveling add up to massive expenses that could easily be avoided with a bit of better planning. And finally, this is also a big one, but you can just see that companies are doing this: underestimating production costs for the elaborate stage setups they want to do. Companies will promise fans these amazing over-the-top stage productions, aka the sort of thing we have become accustomed to seeing from K-pop groups, sort of as an excuse for the very high ticket prices, which is fine if fans are getting that. But then companies later realise the true extent of the cost of transporting and setting up these elaborate stages in different venues and internationally. So either they have to scale back and disappoint fans, or they blow their entire budget on production and end up losing money on the tour itself. Okay, the next poor business decision in K-pop I want to discuss is a hear me out kind of one, but it's when companies debut a new group or schedule a comeback during peak competitor comeback season. So I think this one is a hear me out because I know this sometimes genuinely cannot be avoided, especially when labels announce artist comeback schedules at different times. You can't prepare for everyone. Plus, it's not like albums are just produced overnight. Production has time frames and maybe deadlines they're expecting to meet, and there are only so many weeks within a year, so sometimes schedules will just clash no matter what and no matter how much planning you do. But at the same time, there's definitely some strategic thinking that I think some companies are perhaps lacking in. Just think, if you're a smaller company with limited resources, all of which have been put into debuting this new artist or preparing a first comeback for an artist of yours, why would you then choose to release what you have been working on in the exact same week that 3 major groups are also having their comeback? You're essentially throwing your artists into a battlefield where they're competing against groups with massive fan bases and million-dollar budgets, and it's likely going to be near impossible to compete with. And I've seen the opposite really work well too. So there have been occasions where smaller groups have managed to get their first music show win simply because no bigger artist happened to be active during that time. And that's not to say these groups didn't deserve the win, of course they did, but it shows how much timing can actually matter in the K-pop industry. From a business perspective, it makes more sense to strategically plan your release releases when there's less competition if possible. It's like a basic marketing strategy because it just means you're making sure the market isn't full of competitors. You could argue that for big labels this won't necessarily make a difference because artists with large fandoms or large public following will succeed regardless, but this may be the missing trick small labels could really benefit from. Timing could be the difference between their group getting noticed or completely disappearing into the background. It's like they're setting their own artists up to fail sometimes and then wondering why they're not seeing the results they wanted. Okay guys, and that was it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching if you got this far, and I really hope you enjoyed this one because I enjoyed making it. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topics I brought up in the comments, plus any other poor business or financial decisions you think you have noticed yourself from the K-pop industry. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to hear whenever I upload, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys!